Okay. Hi, everyone. Bipolar astrophotographer here with a special guest, my mom. She and I have been wanting to do this for a little bit. We've been talking about it. I don't know if you want to say anything about why you're here.
Well, I think Kara would like for me to be here to maybe add some thoughts that she hadn't put together because of what she was going through at the time. So, a little bit from the mom perspective.
And what I think we're gonna do is I'm gonna play my. It's a video back on my YouTube channel. You can go and find it after this if you want to watch it. But it's called "Let's Talk Bipolar 101," and it talks about my experience and what happened. I've sped it up to 1.25 speed, so it'll be a little faster. But we're gonna listen to it together, and then as my mom especially feels like she wants to add to something, we're going to pause it and have a conversation from there. So I will go ahead and I apologize if you can see my mouse and the table shaking. I'm not a pro. This isn't professional, but we're going to go ahead and give this a shot. So I started it at about the minute and 34-second area because the whole other part was like the introduction. So we're just going to start from here. And if I need to adjust it a little bit, I will. All right, so today I thought I would talk a little bit about my journey and how bipolar kind of stuff everywhere. How bipolar disorder kind of came into my radar. So there's several things. I wanted to talk about the symptoms. I wanted to talk a little bit about my trauma. I wanted to talk a little bit about why the trauma was the way it was. Now, when we're talking about bipolar disorder, we're talking about being delusional and euphoric and manic and all of these things. That's traumatizing in and of itself. And I should have turned this on silent. And my neighbor thought one of her packages came to me. But also the experience, our mental health system is very, very broken for those who need real genuine help. It's a really broken system. So, for example, I went to the hospital. I was awake for 4 days before I went to the hospital. And I went to the hospital because I really thought I was going to have a heart attack or a stroke. I thought that I was on death's door. Being awake for 4 days, there was a lot going on. And then I was sent from the hospital to a psychiatric hospital on a 72-hour hold. So I was 5150. I was thrown in there against my will. And I was supposed to be there for 72 hours. And it turned into, I think it was a week. I think it was 7 days or almost 7 days. It was very close. Do you want to add anything to this kind of your perspective before I went to the hospital and then was admitted to the psych hospital? Because I know things were leading up that you could see were wrong on your end, but I wasn't here. Let me make the screen bigger again. But I wasn't really aware of them.
Well, I would say even earlier on, maybe I had seen some warning signs that were hard to detect because Kara was going through not only growing up as a teenager, but also TMJ that led to 7 jaw surgeries. So we had a few red flags, but very hard to see bipolar clearly in those circumstances. So, the time that Kara is talking about, I happened to be in Alabama at my sister's for a short visit. And Kara was texting me. I believe it was on a Friday night. I'm really not sure what day of the week it was. And the texts were just disjointed, and some of it made sense and some of it did not.
Well, and you said that I had been leaving out words.
Right. And there were words left out, and there was hyper religiosity even this early on, which confused me. I didn't know where that was coming from. I believe it was the next day or a couple of days later, I was flying back. I was in Dallas at the airport. We were texting. The texts were even harder to understand, and I was getting very, very concerned.
Well, and I didn't remember that I was showing signs of the hyper religiosity before
before you got home. I didn't remember that even in text messages, you're saying I was saying stuff that was
Yes.
about like the religious aspect of it and kind of
Yes.
like I don't know. I don't even know how to say it other than religious, but I didn't remember. I didn't remember that at all. And if you want to keep going, we'll come back to the video in a minute. But I know that because, well, let's see where the video goes. But I do know that you want to talk, because I don't remember. It's been a few weeks now. But I know that you did want to talk about like when I went to. Let me make up a name for her because I don't want to drop her name. But when I went to my best friend's house, and we'll call her Donna. Okay, we'll call her Donna. So I know that at some point during this conversation, you want to mention also what happened with all of that as well, because I remember some of it, but I don't remember it the way that you do. So do you want me to just keep going with the video?
Sure. Well, we can go. I could add a little bit about what you just said.
Do you want to? Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
Here.
So I left Dallas. I flew to the Springs. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And I was very concerned. I was texting her, probably calling her. She was at Donna's house, as she said. And she said she didn't feel like she should drive. And I said, well, I'll come over. And I headed over there, and we left her car there and brought her home. And from that point, I guess the biggest memory is she was talking quickly. She couldn't really satisfy her appetite. She was craving unusual combinations of food, and I think she was drinking a lot of water or whatever I happened to have on hand. There was no alcohol involved. So talking, eating, and very hyped up.
And I didn't remember until we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago that I told you I shouldn't drive. I thought that was a pretty important thing of note, that I somehow in the chaos, my mind was smart enough and logical enough to say, do not get behind the wheel. So I thought that was interesting. Right, so let's go ahead and continue on, and then we'll keep going with this.
And it was a nightmare. The whole experience of it was a nightmare. I was so over medicated. I think my mom said, I don't even remember. I have the paperwork. I think I was on 6 medications or something ridiculous like that when I came out. And it was a whole disaster of a thing. But I did want to talk a little bit about what the symptoms were that got me there and put in there to begin with, and how I really couldn't deny that that's what was going on with me. Once I got out of the hospital and I started really researching and looking into more things and all of this. So I pulled up, and I wanted to share it in the description link on my live stream, the link for this Mayo Clinic article on the symptoms of bipolar disorder, and it wouldn't let me do it quite yet. So maybe I can add it tomorrow. I had to do this like authentication thing or whatever. So I'll read from this. This is from a Mayo Clinic, and I just pulled up the first thing that I did a search on because I feel like this may not be exactly what I read 9 years ago, but it's very close. And some of these symptoms, let me just come back here for a second. Some of these symptoms are very, very obvious in some people and some personalities, and some of these symptoms are very subtle for others. You know, if you're already an energetic person, you may not really, or you know somebody who's really energetic, you may not quite see the blurred line between what's healthy energy and what's unhealthy energy. So there's some that are obvious and there's some that are less obvious. So let's just go through these. So the first one is, and I looked up mostly for both forms of bipolar disorder can be accompanied by these symptoms, but bipolar 1 is a little different, and it's the only one of the two that actually you experience mania and you're manic. And so that's kind of the dividing line, which I have had in the past. Okay, so the first one, abnormally upbeat, jumpy, or wired. That's the energy I was talking about. This one's also the energy. Increased activity, energy, or agitation. Very much so. Exaggerated sense of well-being and self-confidence. I don't know that well-being and self-confidence.
I wanted to ask you. I just muted the mic. Let me make the screen large. I'm going to get better at this at time, but we're going to just do it this way for now. I wanted to ask you about that. Did I have an overwhelming sense of confidence? Because I didn't remember having that, but did you see that in me?
Yes, it had to do with going to Alabama and being helpful as a videographer in a large church there, and who your cousin is pastor of. And it was like you could conquer the world. It was like you could just pick up and change and move your life and do whatever needed to be done.
And now that you say that, I remember it. Because it's everything in the moment of it. Maybe it's because there was just so many thoughts happening all at once. I cannot, until you say something like, and it's like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. Like the not driving, like the knowing not to drive thing. And then what you're saying about like being helpful and feeling like I was going to make this huge difference in the world, like having that confidence in myself. I had forgotten about that. Okay.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Was the euphoria I experienced. I mean, I can see how those would be a part of it, but the euphoria that I experienced was just it was almost like being in a free fall on a roller coaster or a ride. It was just like this, like I've given myself up wholly to this feeling of emotion that I didn't know what it was, but it was euphoria. But I can see how some other people would think, oh, it's safe. I can fly. I can jump off of my roof. Like I can see how that might kind of be something different for somebody than it was for me.
Or I can change.
But mine was very much like I just given up to the powers that be. Decreased need for sleep. I already mentioned 4 days I was awake. I might have taken small little bitty naps in that timeline, but 4 days I was awake. Unusual talkativeness. Now there's some people out there that are talkers, and now that I know that that's a thing, it's a red flag for me. I notice it in others. For me, when I was at my worst before I went to the hospital, it's like I couldn't talk as fast as my mind was thinking. I couldn't, it was very like labored. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get this out there. I have to tell you about this. And then this thought came in, and then this thought. It was chaos on steroids. It really was. It was just this, like, what's the word? Gibbery. I was very gibbery. I don't know if that's the word or not. Racing thoughts. And that's where the unusual excessive talkativeness came in, was these racing thoughts. Distractibility. Yeah, I couldn't focus. I couldn't focus on any one thing. I mean, it was like I had this, and then I had this, and I had to write this down, and I needed to draw this out. Like, poor decision making. Oh, well, that just kind of goes without saying. If you're experiencing all of these other things, you're not going to be in a clear mind to make like wise choices. That's just, in my opinion, that just goes on without saying if you have any of the others listed above. But this one I've never really had trouble with in other ways, because my decision making, albeit very poor in the moment, I never would go on shopping sprees, taking sexual risks, or making foolish investments. Like I think I was too confused. And that is, in my opinion, another one that should be listed on this list of symptoms is confusion. I think confusion is, maybe it just is that goes without saying if you've got any of these other things, but being confused that's a tough one, because I was very confused.
I wanted to add to that confusion, because I know I talk about it in this video, but it does kind of, I do wish that some of the articles that I've read about bipolar disorder since being diagnosed listed that as a common symptom. I mean, in my opinion, it should be up there with mania, or sleep, decreased need for sleep, because I mean, would you agree? Like, I was just so confused, but you saw it differently.
Yes, and also to add to what was said here, pressured speech, and I've seen that in bipolar lists, but it's like you were pressured. You had to say it, you had to get it out, and along with the eating and trying to quench this insatiable appetite, thirst, and me trying. Now, this is the very night that I'd picked you up from your friend's house.
I didn't remember.
And I was trying to get you to think about going to bed. And we're night people. We always have been kind of late night people. But there was no talking you into sleep or going to bed. I can't really remember if you slept.
And I was going to say, and I had already been awake for several nights leading up to this. I didn't remember though, like, what time did your plane land? Do you even know? Was it, because I was at Donna's.
It was probably about sunset, around dark, and when I went to get you, I believe it was dark.
I remember it was dark when you came to get me, and then I didn't remember that this was all in one night. So much happened in such a short amount of time. The pressured speech, definitely. That. And did you ever think, when I was going through all of this, did mental illness ever cross your mind?
I believe the next day, when you were still in this state, and I was the only one with you here because your dad was at work and James was at work. And as the day progressed, I was kind of coming to terms with you were either having a nervous breakdown or you were having a mental health problem. And I don't want to cry.
I know.
When we needed to call your brother, those were the two things I said to him.
I didn't even know she called my brother. So that was the next day when we were just here by ourselves, and you knew that something. What did I'm not going to say his name, but what did my brother say in response to you?
Well, and when I called him, actually, I had already called your dad, and he had come home. I called James and said, we need you, and they were here. And James was taking you to the hospital, and I was calling your brother as James was taking you to the hospital.
And do you remember what my brother said?
He was panicked.
Well, I mean, with good reason. We were all, and I hate, like, when we talk about, like, I hate that this crisis that I was going through caused so much stress for everybody else, like, in my world. But I'm so fortunate that I had the right people. I'm so fortunate that I had the right people, because if you hadn't been here for it, and my dad hadn't been here for it, and my husband hadn't been here for it, and even though my brother wasn't physically here for it, I know that they were praying for me, and I was in their thoughts, and I had the right people. Like, and I don't want to cry either, but I had the right people, and I can't imagine what would have happened to me had I had the wrong people. You know, I can't answer the question for why I have the family and the people that I have. I can't answer that question. I just am very grateful for it and very blessed by it. And it's gotten me, I truly believe all of this support has gotten me to where, in part because I've had to do a lot of the hard work on my own too, but their support and encouragement for me has gotten me where I am today, even though this was really, really awful in the moment. And now I was thinking about it. It's almost exactly 9 years ago that this happened, because what is today? The 29th? And I went to the hospital on the 31st.
Yes.
All right, let's keep going. We may not interrupt very much here and there, but let's keep going.
And one thing that I've said in the past is, with undiagnosed bipolar disorder, I was trying to make nonsense out of sense. Whereas now, I really do try to make sense out of nonsense. I do try to put the puzzle pieces together the way that they're supposed to be. I like to be methodical about the way I crochet, or any crafts I do, or even the cooking that I do. Like, I like to try to, there's a lot of peace in that kind of thinking, to just like lay it out and be steady with how you go about problem solving. Now, I did want to read the differences between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So bipolar 1, and this is where I could not deny my diagnosis, because I denied it for a little while. I've got a cat on the table. After I was released from the hospital. And that I couldn't sit on that long once I started researching, because once I started looking it up, and maybe, yes, that was a hellacious experience at that hospital. And I don't give the workers there much credit because of the way I was treated and how horrific it was for me. But I can't deny that they got my diagnosis right. So I have to kind of, it's a bitter pill. You swallow it and you move on. So bipolar 1 disorder. You've had at least one manic episode that may be preceded or followed by hypomanic or major depressive episodes. In some cases, mania may trigger a break from reality, parentheses, psychosis. I was definitely in psychosis.
So I don't know if I told you this. I remember telling my husband this. It was probably not long after I got out and I was detoxing from all the meds that they had me on. But I had mania the night before I went to the hospital. And James was there. He was in the room with me. I know I was probably manic anyway, but I felt like I actually entered euphoria during this moment. And when I entered that euphoria, I had like a memory sense. Like, I've experienced this before. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I was like, it's almost like a certain smell or when somebody reminds you of somebody, it was like, whoa, I've experienced this level of energy before. And I don't know, I think it may have, like, as far as euphoria is concerned, I feel like I've maybe only had that maybe once or possibly 2 other times in my life. But when I had it here in my old bedroom, because now I own the house that this all happened in, when I had it in that bedroom, I had a memory like, this is not the first time I felt this way. So I think that was another thing that was maybe probably in part why it got overlooked. Yes, TMJ and all the surgeries and all the pain and all of that. But then at the other end of it, I was experiencing things that I didn't know how to name. And so it's like until it happened repeatedly and there was a pattern, I didn't know how to identify it.
And I wanted to add, when you were talking about the hospital, and when I say the hospital, I mean when she was taken to the emergency room and then admitted, I'm not talking about the facility that she was later taken to. And her dad and I were there, and there was a lady doctor that was wonderful, and Kara's father, Kara's father is not one to be adamant, but he begged to bring her home, and they wouldn't let that happen.
I didn't know that. I remember hearing you and Dad and James outside of my room. Was it the 3 of you talking to her?
Well, there was a point where Dad and I were at a counter with her next to us, and we were just really begging to have you come with us, that we would watch you 24 hours a day. And there, I think they become concerned that you might harm yourself.
And I will say this, throughout that entire episode that I had, that all of this story that we're talking about, I never had thoughts of suicide. That never crossed my mind. I mean, if I did, I don't remember it, kind of maybe with some other things, but I've never really struggled with that anyway. So it wasn't like pronounced when I was in this like state of mind or mentality or whatever. But I wanted to ask, this is a tough question to ask. So Dad was begging them to let you guys take me home, and they refused. And do you think that I would have gotten this nailed down as quickly, like as far as a diagnosis, if I had been able to come home, or do you think not?
Well, I think that what they had you on was an M1 hold. I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but I think they have liabilities beyond that 1 or 2 doctors' control, where they have to follow the system. And I'm not sure that you would have gotten the right help. Probably our next step would have been the family doctor. But even for him, he might have sent you back to the hospital.
I had been talking to somebody recently who's been watching my videos on here, and she went to her doctor. This was like 20 years ago. She went to her doctor for mental health concerns, and he said, you have one of two choices. Either you call 911 or I will. So that very much could have been, it made, all roads were pointing, I think, to the same place at this point. Like, it really didn't matter if I went there because you guys had control of it or because the hospital had control of it. I think it was destined to happen.
Right.
So let's just go a little bit longer. We may make this a two-parter because I don't want it to get too long and drawn out. So let's just keep going a little bit. We're about halfway through this video, and I know at the end of this video I do some talking about astrophotography. So let's just go a little longer and see what happens.
Psychosis is a really tough state. It's almost like being drunk, but physically it's a very different feeling. But mentally, it's kind of like being drunk, in my opinion. You are really detached from reality in ways that are kind of hard to explain. Yeah, that was a big one with me. I was also paranoid. That should have been on that list of symptoms too. I don't know if that's common though. I was paranoid. I thought people were after me. Like, I don't know. I was just out of my mind. So I very much have a heart and an empathy for those who have struggled with psychosis and not being in their right mind. I very much, I hear you. I've been there. And I will say that there are options out there. No, it's not curable. I will take this to the grave. This is going to follow me the rest of my life. But it's very, very manageable if you get the right help, and you have to advocate for yourself. You can't just go someplace and trust whatever doctor you're seeing. If it's not working for you, it's not working for you, and you have to fight for yourself. So, okay, on with the symptoms of bipolar 2. Bipolar disorder it's also, like many things, that's on the spectrum. You've got bipolar type 1, and you're going to be on that spectrum. Bipolar type 2, and you're going to be on that spectrum. So bipolar 2, you've had at least one major depressive episode and at least one hypomanic episode, but you've never had a manic episode. That's where that line was drawn for me. One of them is you've had at least one manic episode. The other one is you've never had one. I had to accept that. A lot of the journey to wellness starts with acceptance. It's very, very true it's kind of like admitting you've got a problem. I had to admit that I had a problem. Cyclothymic disorder, this one is different. This one has to do with, this one's a little different, but I'll read it anyway. You've had at least 2 years or 1 year in children and teenagers of many periods of hypomania symptoms and periods of depressive symptoms, though less severe than major depression. Yeah, that one I wouldn't really know how to keep an eye out for. I don't have children.
I've rewatched this video several times, and I don't know that word what did I say? I can't remember the word that I used in that video, but I was thinking about the symptoms of what to look for in children and youth. And it wasn't until long after my diagnosis, I don't know how long, but I started thinking about an incident. Here, let me make this bigger. It's hard because my mouse is weird. I started thinking about an incident that happened in high school, and I think that you know what I'm talking about. I had a boyfriend, and he and I had broken up, and like, it wasn't even 2 days later, I don't think, one of my best, longest friends started dating him. And I lost it on her on the phone. I think that was probably my first real good memory of bipolar rage. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. She was in her bedroom, and I was across the hall near my bedroom. And it was like nothing I'd ever heard before. It frightened me. I felt bad for her friend. And she really, I should have known then that something was wrong.
No, I don't think so. Because at that point, what was I, 16? I had been dealing with my jaw stuff for 3 years. I was already furious with my broken body and not getting answers. There were other things that could have warranted my anger. I will say that bipolar rage, I've experienced it quite a few times since then, especially in my second marriage. I had terrible bipolar rage in my second marriage. And in some ways, I still think it was warranted because of some of the ways I was being treated. But there's a lot, like I felt possessed. I mean, I don't really know how else to say it.
And I was there for one of those events, and your dad was with me, and yeah, you were pretty explosive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. So I've definitely had my fair share of bipolar rage. And thank the Lord that it didn't get me put in jail. And yes, I do feel bad for my friend, the way that I screamed. And I never apologized to her. Life just changes, but if I ever have a chance to, I'm going to apologize to her face.
But knowing it and reading it, I do have teenagers in my world and in my life, and that's something that I definitely will keep an eye out for. And then the other types, they include, for example, bipolar and related disorders induced by certain drugs or alcohol or due to a medical condition such as Cushing's disease, multiple sclerosis, or stroke. Now what was the other thing? Oh, here we go. I wanted to read this too. It's right under it. And I'd share my screen. I'm still learning, but eventually maybe I'll just share my screen and you can read with me. But I will, in the meantime, try to get a link so you can follow this and go to where I'm reading. But bipolar 2 disorder is not a milder form of bipolar 1, but a separate diagnosis. While the manic episodes of bipolar 1 disorder can be severe and dangerous, individuals with bipolar 2 can be depressed for longer periods, which can cause significant impairment. Although bipolar disorder can occur at any age, typically it's diagnosed in the teenage years or early 20s. Symptoms can vary from person to person, and symptoms may vary over time. I think part of the reason why mine was overlooked, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 33, well, almost 33. I turned 33 the August after. And I think that mine got overlooked a little bit because I had 7 jaw surgeries.
I'm going to fast forward this because we were talking about this already.
In my 20s.
Let me see if I can figure it out.
My first surgery was in 2002 and my last surgery was in 2007.
Let me just fast forward a couple minutes.
Let's just say that physical pain, chronic pain, can really be crazy making. And so in my 20s, and with my jaw, I couldn't.
That's still talking about, yeah.
And my diagnosis happened. And I think that I was trying to numb whatever it was that I was dealing with.
That's where I was talking about that I was smoking a lot of pot back then because I didn't know. I was trying to help myself. I was looking for a way to help myself, but I didn't know what was wrong. So that's where I was talking about.
Because I didn't know what was going on with me.
I think that's probably the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, it's shaking stuff. Stop it. Myself. One of them is if I'm dealing with something that's really, really tough and I don't know exactly how to put it into words yet, and I'm just kind of trying to figure out what's going on with me, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think that's really the majority of the video because this kind of just goes on with things that I've learned about my diagnosis, my personal journey with bipolar, the symptoms that I notice now, and I identify them as symptoms. That's pretty much, we got through, I think, the nuts and bolts. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yes. About the hospital, the mental hospital that came into our lives, very much over medicated. My memory might be 7 drugs, and we're not talking, low dose minor drugs. We're talking major drugs. And the over medication was ridiculous. And the changes that we saw in Kara in probably 6 months were incredible because our family doctor worked with her. She stepped away from all of that except for one medication for bipolar 1. And the person that she is now is a totally different person. I mean, she does astrophotography, she crochets, she cross stitches. This girl can sing and dance, and it's just incredible. But what I want to say is if you see someone falling down that deep, dark hole, do everything you can to get help. They need help. And this is kind of a side thing, but the eating, it was very odd. The combination of foods, it was, I even wrote down, it was very unusual for my daughter. And just nothing would quench that appetite and the pressured speech. Watch out for these things in your children, in your grandchildren, in your next door neighbors' kids. Keep an eye out for things that might be pointing to bipolar, that maybe you don't know a lot about it, but watch for those symptoms.
And I would add, and you're making me cry, but I would also add that while this world and the mental health system is still so broken, I think, like my mom was saying about watching out for these things, if you can spot these signs early on, the easier the journey is going to be for the person, whether it's an adult or a teenager or a child or even somebody that's older than you, whatever it is. But the sooner you can catch it, the easier it's going to, the younger age you can spot it. I tell you what, I watch my niece and nephews like hawks. Like they don't know that I'm analyzing them, but I am analyzing them to a degree because I know what to watch out for. And I think maybe you do a little bit with them, with the kids, with the grandkids. Because if it's gonna happen, we want to figure it out as early as possible. Because like she said, the over medication, I had told a nurse later on, just like 2 or 3 of the medications that I was on when I came out, and she said, those could have killed you. She flat out told me that those doses and those combinations could have killed me. Now, I understand when I go to a psych hospital and I'm out of my mind, I get that they have to kind of load me up to get me down. But they wanted me to stay on that. It's like, it's like if you have surgery and they tell you to like take, Vicodin for 3 days. You stop after 3 days. It's only for surgery pain. You stop after 3 days. They wanted me to stay on these medications that brought me down from the beginning. And they wanted me to live this way. And now I know personally people who have followed the directions of taking multiple medications like this, who now suffer from liver problems, like cirrhosis of the liver, and they're younger than me. So you do that advocation of yourself. And what you said about me not being the same person, I don't, like, if I had changed on the outside as much as I changed on the inside, I would be unrecognizable. Mm-hmm. Right. I have worked very hard, but I also had this huge support. So I want to offer support right here, right now. If you need somebody to help guide you in a direction, if you feel like you know somebody who's in a crisis, or you yourself are in a crisis, and you need a non-biased person in your life, I should have made this bigger. That's okay. I'll make it bigger now. Please reach out to me at thebipolarastrofotographer@gmail.com. I am more than happy. I'm not a professional, but I'm more than happy to help you find the right people for where you live and help you do research and help you start your own path to wellness, because it is when you're in the midst of the chaos, if it gets to like where I was, I had no choice. I got thrown into a psych hospital. And the best thing that I feel like we can do for anybody who's struggling with these symptoms is try to get into them, to tap into them, and to figure things out before it gets to the point where you get thrown in a hospital and you have no choice. So please reach out to me at thebipolarastrofotographer@gmail.com. If you need help with anything, I'm willing to make phone calls. I'm willing to write whoever. I'm willing to do whatever you need. If you don't have that kind of support, because I had it. And the very least I can do is pay it forward. So, well, thank you for coming and making us both cry.
But of course, yes, just know that we're happy now and we're laughing, and
I'm very, very grateful for my mother.
We're productive people, and it's all worked out, although it was a very difficult journey.
It could have very well gone a different way. I'm just very thankful that it went the way that it did.
Yes.
All right. Well, I would like to do maybe some more of these conversations down the line. I felt like this was the most important one as far as talking about the symptoms and having some, the bird's eye, the outsider's point. All you have heard is me talk about my experience, but now you got to hear a little bit about what her experience was watching me and, observing my behavior. And that's a key element because, like I said, I don't remember some things and she does, and I'm very glad that we've all gotten through this. It's been a group effort, but it's paid off. So, well, thank you so much for doing this, Mom. I love you. All right, well, I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to stop this. So, bye.